Today we're going to talk about the elms. Ulmus, U-L-M-U-S. Ulmus, the Latin simply means elm. Now, why are we doing elms? My friend Frank Montgomery, known Frank for 40 years, and he sent me an email recently going on about trees that he knew, one of which is the elm. Now, this elm here, Ulmus glabra, is also known as the witch elm or the Scots elm. Well, I often went mountaineering with Frank. I was at Leeds University doing my PhD in economics, and often at the weekend we used to go up to Scotland occasionally to do some cairngorm climbing and other mountains in Scotland. And often we went past Loch Lomond. Now, the meaning of Loch Lomond is contested, but one is that it's the Loch of Elms, these sort of elms. The Ulmus glabra can grow to 30 metres. This one's not going to get to that height because, as you can see, the branches are drooping downwards. It's a pendular variant of the tree. And there's a spectacular one in the Parliament Gardens, the grounds of the New Zealand government. Now, the wood, I should mention, is prized by craftsmen because of its colouring. But apparently elms don't burn very well. Elm number 2, Ulmus carpinifolia. Carpin refers to the hornbeam, I think, is what the Romans called the hornbeam, which is of the betula family, but has similar leaves. This tree is also known as the field elm. Now, there's a bit of an irony there, because 15 years ago when I was driving here, I used to drive along the road and there was one of these in a field, but I didn't know what it was called. But I went to a garden centre and I managed to get 3. One here, one over there, and one over there. And they've all done quite well. This one especially because it's nearest the water. And you can also see it suckering. There's one popped up there. Right. So this is the method whereby elms procreate themselves. They can sucker up to 50 metres away from the tree. Now, this elm is also known as the smooth-leaved elm. If you touch it, the leaves are very smooth. It can grow to, this one's doing particularly well, it can grow to 20 metres. Typical height's 14. I suppose depends on the water situation on the soil. Now, the field elm that I first saw unfortunately got chopped down, I think, so it's no longer with us. Now, so that's Ulmus carpinifolia. Moving over here, let's talk about some other unfortunate news to talk about the elm. Ulmus hollandica, otherwise known as Dutch elm. Now, this is a hybrid between that one, carpinifolia, probably not the queen bird, and the glabra over there. Has dark green serrated edges to its leaves, and clearly also suckers. And in terms of its height, it can get 20 to 30 metres, quite variable. I don't think this one's going to get that tall somehow. The bad news, Dutch elm disease. It's managed to get to New Zealand later than it got to Europe, and it's called Dutch elm disease not because it affects just this type of tree, because it affects most of the ulmus, I think, and also the zelkova, which is related to the elm. Now, it's called the Dutch elm disease because 2 Dutch people discovered it in 1921. Schwartz and Wiesman, I think they were at some university in Holland, and they found it. The disease is a fungal disease. It's the Ascomycota, and it's spread by the European bark beetle, apparently. Now, in 1967 there was a particularly virulent outbreak of it. So they've had waves of outbreaks. In 1967 there was a particularly virulent one that affected Britain from a log shipment from Canada. And that wiped out most of the elm trees in Britain and in Northern Europe. It came here in, I think, the early 2000s, late maybe 90s, and and it landed in Auckland, and that's where it's remained. There were 20,000 elm trees in Auckland. Not too sure how many there are now, but last year 50 were felled in Myers Park, Auckland. So not good news. But I've persevered, and hopefully it's not going to come down here. Now, the better news. These healthy looking trees. These trees are from China. It's called Ulmus parvifolia. Parvifolia. Folia means foliage. Parvi means small. So you can see these leaves are a lot smaller than the leaves on the European elms I was showing you over there. And that has a benefit because it's quite wind resistant. So that's why I planted them here. So they're a shelter belt tree. And in towns in Wellington, there's quite a lot planted there as well, because not only are they good in wind, but their bark sheds a lot. So like the plane tree, they are pollution resistant as well. Ulmus parvifolia. Another feature of the Chinese elm is that they are semi-evergreen. Unlike the European ones where the leaves fall off reasonably soon, these ones can stay on most of winter. A tree you've probably never heard of, but I needed a tree in my arboretum beginning with Z. This is the Zelkova. The Zelkovas, of which there are 6 variants, I think this one is the Carpinfolia Zelkova, are allied to the elms because they have similar serrated leaves. The tree can grow up to, this one supposedly can grow up to 30 metres, and one of the features is that their trunk often splits, so you need to manage it early in life, otherwise they go out like that and you get a very wide tree. Something not for your garden. Now in terms of the meaning, I think the meaning Zelkova, I've looked it up, and apparently Zelkova's from Georgia, and stone pillar is the meaning of the Zelkova. So don't know how they get the tree and the stone pillar together. I've got a couple of variants left of elm trees. A lot of variants were created because of Dutch elm disease, and they were trying to build up resistance by crossing them. Now this one's a cross between the Chinese elm, which is more resistant to Dutch elm than the European elm, and the Carpinifolia elm. On to the last one. It's my tour of my elm trees. I have a few varieties, not all, there's about 40 plus loads of variants of them I suppose. And the one that I don't have, sadly, is the English elm. I'll have to get one of those. I can't have a Scots one without an English one, Frank. I'll have to get an English one.